I don't really know when I started timing my mornings to hers. It wasn't on purpose, at least not the kind you admit to. There's this coffee shop tucked under the apartments where I rent, the kind with squeaky chairs and a clock that always runs 3 minutes slow. I'd come down for my usual, black coffee, no sugar, pretending it was about convenience. But it wasn't. She was always there first. Sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a mug that cooled too fast. She never rushed. Sometimes she'd tilt her head toward the street, like she was waiting for something that wasn't going to come. Other times she'd read, though I noticed she rarely turned the page. I was 22 and supposed to be too restless for routine. But I kept showing up. The first time we spoke, it was nothing. She slid my coffee across the counter because the barista had his hands full, and I said, "Thanks." That was it. But the next day, she looked up before I ordered. "Black, right?" Her voice was low, even, the kind that didn't need to reach for attention. I nodded, maybe too quickly. She smiled like she'd caught me out, and I found myself staring at the curve of her hand around the cup more than her face. I told myself it was nothing, that people remember orders all the time. But when she added, almost casually, "No sugar," I felt something shift, like she'd been watching too. After that, it was small things. She'd laugh, not loudly, but under her breath, when I dropped my change. I'd fold and refold a napkin while pretending not to notice how her eyes lingered on me longer than politeness required. I never asked her age. I didn't need to. The silver threaded through her hair told me enough. Mid-40s, maybe more. Old enough for my mom to notice the lines at the corners of her eyes and say things like, "She's lived her life, find someone your own speed." But my mom didn't see her the way I did. She didn't see the way silence seemed to hang differently around her, how even the scrape of her spoon against ceramic felt deliberate, like part of some rhythm I was only beginning to hear. And maybe I liked that she never asked me the questions everyone else did. What are you studying? What's next? Where do you see yourself? She let the pauses stay. Sometimes we'd sit in parallel silence, her scrolling absently through her phone, me pretending to read a textbook I'd already given up on. It was in those pauses that something lived. I caught myself once, staring too long at her hands. She noticed. Instead of pulling away, she just set her cup down slowly, fingers brushing the table, as if she was giving me permission to keep looking. "Long morning?" she asked. "Always," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant. The clock ticked above us, 3 minutes late, as usual. She smiled, small and knowing, and for a second I thought she might say something else. She didn't. She just left her scarf draped over the back of her chair when she stood to go, like she wanted me to notice. I didn't move. Not until my phone buzzed against the table. A text from her. Short, almost careless. "You forgot your change." But beneath it was something more. Because she never asked for my number. And I had never given it. The next time I saw her, it wasn't at the cafe. It was on the narrow stairs between our apartments. She was carrying groceries, paper bags tucked awkwardly against her side. One slipped, an apple rolling down toward me. I caught it before it hit the landing. "Reflexes," I said, handing it back. "Finally useful," she murmured, lips curving, and for a second I felt too proud of something so small. I offered to carry the rest up, more excuse than necessity. Her door was just below mine, and I'd passed it 100 times without thinking. But stepping inside, it felt different. The air smelled faintly of tea leaves and laundry soap, the kind of scent that makes you slow down without knowing why. "Just put them on the counter," she said. I did, noticing how the kitchen was too neat, like someone lived there carefully, afraid of leaving things undone. She filled the kettle, glanced at me. "Tea?" I should have said no. Instead, I sat at the edge of a chair, watching steam rise. She leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. "You live upstairs, but I never hear you. That's rare around here. I don't have much worth making noise about," I admitted. Her brow lifted. "That's a strange thing for someone your age to say." I shrugged, folding the paper tea wrapper in my hand until it was a tight square. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired early. Something flickered in her expression, not pity, not quite curiosity. More like recognition. She told me then, quietly, that she used to come home to silence long before she expected to. Her marriage had ended years ago. You think you'll get used to it, she said, staring at the steam. But some silences feel heavier than others. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. Just let the pause hold. And maybe that was why she looked at me differently after. Not like a landlord, not like someone older explaining life, but like someone relieved to not be explaining at all. I caught myself wondering how it would look if someone else walked in, me at her table, tea cooling between us, both of us staring at nothing in particular. My mom's words played in the back of my head, don't waste your time on her. But here I was, wasting it gladly. When I finally stood to leave, she reached to take my empty cup. Our hands brushed, barely, a passing accident. But it wasn't nothing. My chest tightened at the warmth of it. She didn't move her hand right away. Neither did I. Then she smiled, faint but sure, and said, "Guess I owe you an apple." I laughed too quickly and stepped back, but the heat of that touch followed me up the stairs. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The routine shifted before I was ready. She stopped coming to the cafe for a few mornings. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy, people change habits. But I noticed. The empty window seat, the absence of her scarf hanging on the chair, even the barista not glancing toward the door like he usually did when she was late. I caught myself checking my phone too often. No texts. Not that I had any reason to expect them. By the fourth day, I almost convinced myself it had been one-sided. That maybe she'd let her hand linger on mine by accident, nothing more. And then, that evening, I saw her again. She was in the laundry room at the bottom of the stairs, pulling clothes from a dryer. Head down, sleeves rolled to her elbows. I stood there longer than I should have before speaking. "Thought you'd disappeared." She looked up, startled, then softened. "Just busy." I wanted to ask with what, but the words stuck. Instead, I leaned against the doorway, pretending casual, while my chest tightened like I'd been holding my breath for days. We talked about nothing: detergent brands, the building's old machines, how quarters always went missing. But the space between us carried more than the words. When she bent to grab a dropped sock, her hair fell forward. I almost reached out to brush it back, the impulse sharp and sudden. My hand half lifted, then stilled. She noticed anyway. Straightening, she gave me a look that felt like it had weight. Not an invitation. Not a rejection. Just awareness. And then the door opened. One of my friends, Sam, walked in, holding his basket. He grinned, nodded at her, then at me. "Didn't know you two hung out." Something in my chest jolted. Her face shifted, quick and unreadable, before she turned back to folding. "Just neighbors," she said. Too quickly. I laughed, but it came out thin. "Yeah. Neighbors." Sam didn't notice, already distracted by a machine clanking too loudly. But I noticed. The way her shoulders tightened. The way she avoided my eyes. After he left, silence filled the room again, heavier now. "You should be careful," she said, not looking at me. "Of what?" Her hands paused over the folded clothes. "People see things that aren't there." I wanted to tell her that wasn't true. That there was something, right here, between us. But the words died in my throat. Instead, I moved closer. Too close. I could see the faint line of freckles across her cheek, the tired edge in her eyes, the way her breath caught just once before she steadied it. She turned her head slightly, just enough that I thought, but then she stepped back. Just one step. Enough to break it. The moment closed like a door. I shoved my hands into my pockets, pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I hadn't leaned forward, heart ready for something that didn't happen. And when she finally met my gaze again, it was with a half smile. Sad. Careful. Good night. she said softly, lifting the basket and walking past me. I stayed there, staring at the machines, heat still on my face, wondering if I'd imagined all of it. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind of dusk where the sky turns a washed-out gray and everything feels half-finished. I ran into her outside the building. She was locking her door, scarf around her neck though the air wasn't that cold. She looked like she was about to leave, then hesitated when she saw me. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "Just a walk," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hand lingered on the key longer than necessary. I nodded. "Mind if I?" She didn't answer, just slipped the key into her pocket and started down the street. I followed. We didn't talk at first. The sound of our steps filled the silence, hers measured, mine uneven. I kept glancing sideways, catching the faint crease in her brow, the way she avoided my eyes like the ground needed all her attention. Finally she said, "I saw you with your friends earlier. You looked different." "Different how?" "You smiled more." A pause. "You should do that more often." I almost laughed. "It's easier when you're not there to see it." Her head turned sharply. I regretted it instantly, but I didn't take it back. The truth was already out, hanging there between us like a wire pulled too tight. She stopped walking. We were standing by the park bench near the corner store, the one with peeling paint and a crooked armrest. She sat down, and after a moment I did too. The street lamp above us buzzed faintly. I could smell damp leaves, the faint sweetness of someone's laundry drifting from an open window nearby. "You can't say things like that," she said at last. Not angry, just tired. "Why not?" "Because you're young. And I'm not. And people will talk. And—" She broke off, pressing her hands together in her lap. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Her fingers tightened. "Because it feels like I forget myself when you're around. And that's not supposed to happen anymore." I swallowed hard. The words should have scared me, but instead, they pulled me closer. "Maybe forgetting yourself isn't always bad." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes searching, conflicted, like she was deciding whether to step off a ledge. I wanted to tell her everything right then. That my days felt heavier when she wasn't there. That I checked my phone for messages that never came. That when her hand brushed mine, I replayed it like a song stuck in my head. But all I said was, "I don't want this to end before it even starts." Her breath caught. A tiny sound, but enough. The quiet between us thickened, almost unbearable. Her hand shifted, just slightly, resting near mine on the bench. My fingers twitched, aching to close the space. She whispered, "You don't know what you're asking." I turned close enough to see the faint shimmer of light on her lip, the smallest tremor in her voice. Maybe I leaned in. Maybe she did. I don't remember. But I remember the pause that followed. The kind that stretched, filled, demanded. A question left hanging in the air, unspoken, but louder than anything either of us could say. She disappeared again. Not like before, this time it felt deliberate. No morning coffee runs, no quiet walks, not even the sound of her door unlocking beneath mine. At first, I tried to be patient. People need space, I told myself. She had warned me, after all. Dangerous. Complicated. All those words meant to keep me at a distance. But the silence stretched. Days turned into a week, and I found myself inventing reasons to knock. Broken faucet, lost mail, a question about the lease. Each excuse sounded false before I even reached her door. I never raised my hand to knock. Then one night, I heard voices outside her apartment. A man's voice. Low, steady. Her laugh, different from the one she gave me. Sharper. Guarded. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, caught between listening and running. Eventually the door closed, the voices muted. I went back to my room and stared at the ceiling for hours. The next morning, she was at the cafe again. Window seat. Scarf. Mug in her hands like nothing had changed. She saw me in line, lifted a hand in a small wave. Like the past week hadn't happened. Like the man's voice was just my imagination. I joined her anyway. Sat down, tried to steady my breathing. "You've been gone," I said. Her smile was quick, practiced. "Just had things to take care of." I wanted to ask who he was. Instead, I asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded. "Too fast." "Of course." We both sipped our drinks. The silence pressed down heavier than words. Finally, she said, "I wasn't sure I should come back here." "Why?" Her eyes stayed on the street outside. "Because it's easier to let certain things fade before they become harder to undo." The words hit sharper than I expected. I set my cup down, fingers tight around the handle. "So you were just going to stop showing up?" She turned then, her gaze soft but unreadable. "Maybe." And just like that, I couldn't tell if she was pushing me away for her sake or for mine. When I got home that night, I typed out a message. Just one line. "Tell me if you want me to stop." I stared at it for an hour. Sentences formed broke apart. I deleted them all. Left the message unsent, the screen glowing in the dark. The next morning, her seat at the cafe was empty again. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I saw her again by accident. Late evening, stairwell half lit, the hum of the old building filling the silence. She was unlocking her door, grocery bag slipping from her arm. Before I could think, I bent down to catch it. "Careful," I said, setting it against the wall. She exhaled, almost a laugh. "Always showing up when things fall." Neither of us moved to leave. I should have gone upstairs. She should have stepped inside. But we stayed there, in the narrow landing where the air smelled faintly of dust and rain. I swallowed, words pushing up before I could smother them. "Why did you disappear?" Her keys stilled in her hand. "Because this isn't simple." "I'm not asking for simple." My voice cracked. I just want honest." She looked at me then, eyes tired but unflinching. "Honest? Then here it is, I'm afraid. Afraid of how easily you fit into my days. Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of waking up one morning and realizing I should have known better." Her hand trembled against the keyring. "And you think I'm not afraid?" I said quietly. "Half the time I don't even know what I'm doing. But when you're not around, it feels like something's missing. And I don't want to keep pretending it isn't there." The silence after that was thick, heavy enough to make my chest hurt. She leaned back against the door, closing her eyes. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. But I did. Her eyes opened, meeting mine, searching. For what, I didn't know, certainty, permission, maybe proof I wouldn't disappear too. I stepped closer, slow enough to give her the choice. Her hand dropped from the key, brushing lightly against mine at her side. Not a grab, not even a hold. Just a touch, small but steady. We stood like that for a long time. Neither of us pulling away. Finally, she said, softer than the stairwell hum, "What happens if we're wrong?" I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Then at least it won't be because we stayed quiet." Her lips curved, not into a full smile, but something real. Fragile. She let out a breath that sounded like surrender. Not giving up, giving in. Her hand pressed a little more firmly into mine. "Okay," she said. Nothing else. Just that one word. But it was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Time passed. Not quickly, not all at once, just in the ordinary ways. The cafe clock was still 3 minutes slow, though now we sat at the window together. Sometimes I ordered first, sometimes she did. Black coffee for me, tea for her. The barista stopped looking surprised. We never talked about the night in the stairwell. We didn't need to. What came after wasn't fireworks or sudden clarity. It was steady, uneven, sometimes frustrating. But it was ours. Her days stayed full, work, errands, calls she never explained in detail. My friends noticed I disappeared more often, but they stopped asking where. We didn't announce anything. We didn't need to. One morning, I caught myself smiling at the bench by the corner store, the one with the crooked armrest. She noticed too. What? She asked. Nothing, I said, but I think she knew. That bench carried something unspoken, the moment when everything could have stopped, or started. She just slipped her scarf tighter around her neck and kept walking. Our steps found the same rhythm. Sometimes we argued. About little things, her leaving the light on, me forgetting my keys. Once, she told me she was too old for this, that I'd regret it someday. I didn't answer right away. Just poured her tea and set it down in front of her. She smiled despite herself. It wasn't perfect. But it didn't have to be. One evening, months later, we sat in the laundry room again, machines humming. She leaned against the dryer, sipping tea from a thermos. I pretended to read, book open but untouched. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. You're quiet tonight. Just thinking. About what? I hesitated, then shrugged. How the clock in the cafe's still wrong. 8:47 every morning, like it never moves. She laughed softly. Maybe it's trying to keep something the same. I nodded, watching her tuck her hair behind her ear, silver strands catching the light. And I realized that was it, the routine, the pauses, the silences we didn't rush to fill. That was where we lived now. Later, as we carried laundry back upstairs, she slipped her hand into mine. No words. Just that small, steady gesture. And I thought about what my mom had said, all those months ago, don't waste your time on her. But she was my time. Not wasted. Not rushed. Just lived. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who believes in quiet love. Subscribe for more stories that ache, breathe, and linger, the kind that could have happened yesterday, to someone you know.